Welcome to part 12 of my guide to video game history. In this episode we'll look at the twilight years of the 8-bit home console and computer market, before bidding a fond farewell to the 8-bit world and a big hello to the 16-bit world that replaced it. This would also be an interesting time, with Nintendo's first having its real rivals to its all-domineering supremacy. To begin with, let's go back and tell the story of Sega. Originally in 1940 there was a company in Hawaii set up by an American, Marty Bromley, called Standard Games, and the company would provide American military coin-up amusements. After World War II, another American, David Rosen, moved to Tokyo and would set up a company called Rosen Enterprises Incorporated. He originally began selling art, but in 1954 started to import photo booths from America to Japan. The do-it-yourself photo booths was a massive success, as in Japan photo IDs were needed for so many documents, with all the bureaucracy of the time, and so an automatic photo taker was massively cheaper than going to a photographer, and so it was a huge success. David Rosen started importing other devices, such as jukeboxes and pinball machines, and found that there was a real market in Japan for such devices. In 1965, Standard Games and Rosen Enterprises would merge together, calling their new company Service Games Enterprises, or Sega Enterprises for short. In 1968, Sega moved into designing their own coin-operated amusements, and they had some real success with Periscope, a fantastically ambitious mechanical game which had you look through a periscope taking out battleships. There was also Motor Polo, which was a two-player mechanical game, where you controlled a foam motorcycle as you attempted to bat a ping-pong ball into the opponent's goal. In 1969, Sega Enterprise was sold to Gulf and Western, although David Rosen remained as CEO, and under his leadership would go from strength to strength, releasing mechanical arcade games such as Duck Hunt, where you shot ducks that appeared on the lake with your rifle, and Missile, which had you take out missiles attacking your army base. Then in 1972 they would release the underwater-looking mechanical game called Killer Shark. After 1973, Sega would start to release its own computer video games, starting with its own Pong arcade clone called Table Hockey and Pongtron, before moving on to its own video game classics such as Heavyweight Championship in 1976. In 1983, in the video game crash, Sega fell like many video game manufacturers of the time, with Gulf and Western selling Sega to Bally Midway. This was in turn bought back by David Rosen and Hayao Nakayama, with Nakayama heading up Sega in Japan and Rosen looking after its subsidiary company Sega of America. As we mentioned in the previous episode, in 1983 Sega had only had minimal success with their first console machine released called the SG-1000 Mark I. They would try again the following year with the SG-1000 Mark II. This variant did little more. The problem was that Nintendo had almost all of the home console market wrapped up in both Japan and the US. And because they had control of the market, they also had strong, strict licensing deals with all the publishers, forcing the publishers not to make their games for any other machines other than Nintendo. However, not to be deterred, in 1985 Sega tried again with the SG-1000 Mark III. This essentially was the Master System in all but name, but they still couldn't break into the Japanese market. So they attempted to try in the US, and in 1986 they changed its name to the more exciting sounding Master System in the hope that the Western sounding name would sell the console. As well as the name change, they also restyled the console, giving it a more sleek and exciting look. in a bid to sell the machine. The newly designed machine was gorgeous to look at, with its bold 80s styled black and red design. As well as the cartridge slot, it also had a card reader as well, where you could also play games that could potentially be cheaper to manufacture. Things were marginally more successful now, especially as the Master System came with the brilliant arcade home port of Hang On, and Safari Hunt, a light gun game, with the console also coming with the Sega Light Phaser. But again, like in Japan, Sega was crippled by Nintendo's stranglehold over the game publishers, by insisting that games that they released would only be exclusive to the NES machine. With such market dominance, any publisher would be foolhardy not to comply to Nintendo, or encounter their infamous wrath, or even worse, the pulling of the right to make games for the NES system. Sega had to work a way through this impregnable fortress that Nintendo had built. The answer lay in the rest of the world, to Japan and America. Sure, in these regions of Japan and America, Nintendo had full control, but in Europe, South America, South Africa and Australasia, they had only half bothered, with Mattel making a real mess in Europe, for example. Sega decided to take the Europe market first, and would enlist the help of Mastertronic to distribute the games. Mastertronic, who had been so successful with the budget home computer title games. The machine, distributed by Mastertronic and made by Sega, was a huge success, with the idea of instantly loading games and decent arcade conversions really appealing to those game players who'd only had home computer games to compare with. By 1987, Mastertronic would sell on a high note to Richard Branson's Virgin, and so becoming Virgin Mastertronic and eventually Virgin Software or Virgin Games. The Master System games may have not had the wide range of titles released on the NES, but it certainly had some classics. And to Nintendo's Mario, Sega's early mascot was Alex the Kid, a criminally forgotten gaming star of yesteryear, first appearing in Alex the Kid in Miracle World in 1986. The game was a twee, simple platformer that had you make your way through 11 stages of Miracle World to save the city Redactian from disaster. Alex is a master of the art of shellcore, which means he has a mega punch that will smash most kind of beasties and rocks to help you progress in the game. Other memorable parts of the game was the paper, scissor, rock minigame that you would have to play to succeed. In 1987, Alex would appear again in a cash-in Alex Kidd BMX trial, which came out only in Japan and came with a free paddle controller. But in 1988, he would come back again on a worldwide release with Alex Kidd and the Lost Stars, which was also released in the arcades. This was actually the weakest game in the series, being a very simplified affair. Marginally better in 1989 was his fourth game, Alex Kidd High-Tech World, which had you play our big-eared hero, who is now Prince of the city of Redactian, and is told by your mate Paul about a really cool country called High-Tech World that makes all the best video games. Sounds like Japan then. Alex is desperate to go, but first must find 8 pieces of a map to find directions. In his fifth and final game, Alex Kidd in Shinobi World, this had you play a parody of the Sega arcade classic Shinobi. Originally, the game was simply called Shinobi Kid, being just a cute version of Shinobi, but Sega, never wanting to miss a licensing trick, decided to add in Alex Kidd into the game as a marketing ploy to up the popularity still further. The game was much better than the previous 3 games, although still not as good as his first outing. But back in 1987, and the Master System wasn't all about the big-eared one. There would also be an engaging game called Zillion, which is a criminally forgotten game of today. Based on the popular anime show of the time, Zillion would offer a nice variant of the Impossible Mission style game that was a lot more action-orientated. In the game you had to negotiate a complex, destroying canisters to find key cards. These cards could be used to carry out instructions such as opening doors and barriers using computers. The game would also have a follow-up game released in 1988 called Zillion 2, the Tri-Formation. This unfortunately dumbed things down into a scrolling bike blaster, losing the depth of the original. However, it was well put together and quite good fun for those up for the serious hard challenge. Well, that was part A. Please go on to part B, where we'll cover other games on the Master System and PC Engine.